Okay, good evening, everyone. Now, we're going to go back to introduction to cryptography. We're going to discuss introduction to cryptography, but we're not going to be doing much of the practical. We're just going to be discussing the algorithms, how they work. We're not going to do any of the implementation. So, let's get started. I shared this slide with us earlier, and I also shared income messages also, so you can check the income messages so you can access the slides. Now, introduction to cryptography. My name is Adula Bakosi. For those of you that, in fact, all of you should know my name by now. Uh, Now let's get started. So I already explained cryptography to us on that was on Tuesday. I already explained cryptography. I explained cryptography. Anthony has explained cryptography, and okay, Shalom didn't explain it last class. She explained and decryption. But by now we all should be familiar with the term cryptography. So cryptography is basically the process of turning a document into unreadable text using mathematical algorithms. So we get to use algorithms to turn data into unreadable format so that only people who are supposed to access the document, only the authorized parties can access the original document. Now, cryptography is the practice of securing information by turning it into an unreadable format using mathematical algorithms. The aim is to make it difficult for unauthorized parties to access the original document. Now, on Thursday, that was the last class, Shalom explained what encryption and decryption is. Now, cryptography is basically divided into two main processes. It's divided into encryption and decryption. So, encryption is the process of turning the data into the unreadable, and then decryption is the process of taking the unreadable format, the unreadable document we have, and changing it into the original text. That's the original data we had. Now, there are two main types of cryptography. We have symmetric key cryptography and asymmetric key cryptography. On Tuesday, and I think I will share it on Thursday, I shared with us some videos we could use to brush up on symmetric key cryptography and asymmetric key cryptography. So by now we should know that symmetric key cryptography is also called secret key cryptography, and asymmetric key cryptography is also known as public key cryptography. Now, just with the issue of answer, I'm just going to ask a question and I want everybody to raise their hand. How many people went through the materials, the YouTube videos I shared on the WhatsApp group? Let me just see your hands. How many people? Just three people. Okay, okay, that's okay. Okay. I'll try as much as possible to break down the concepts in the small time we have. Let's move on. Now, cryptography is a mathematical concept. Like it involves lots. It involves lots and lots of mathematics. So, cryptography is the science of using mathematics to encrypt and decrypt data. Now, cryptography enables you to store sensitive information or transmit it across insecure networks, like the internet itself. So, only people who are supposed to read the document. So that's the author of the document now, the author of this data, and the intended recipient can have access to this said document. Now, cryptography is the science of securing data. Cryptanalysis, on the other hand, is the science of analyzing and breaking secure communication. So, cryptanalysis is the opposite of cryptography. Now, cryptanalysis is a combination of analytical skills, application of mathematical tools, pattern finding, a lot of patience, determination, and a sprinkle of luck. So, cryptanalysts are also called attacker. Now, cryptology, it embraces both cryptography and cryptanalysis. So, cryptology is the study is a combination of fields of cryptography and cryptanalysis. Now, let's move on. encryption and decryption. Now, data that can be read and understood without any special measures is what we refer to as plain text or clear text. Now, I'm going to be making use of plain text for for the rest of the class. So, anyway, I see plain text, you basically understand that I am trying to data that can be read and understood without the use of any special tools or any special gadget or anything. So, just your normal data without that's your unencrypted data now is what we refer to as plain text. Now, after encrypting the data, we arrive at something we call the ciphertext. So encrypting plain text is what gives us the ciphertext. Now the ciphertext is just a bunch of random strings and stuff that it's completely looking at it normally now. It's just a bunch of rubbish, but it's actually the ciphertext that corresponds with a particular plain text. Emmanuel, do you have a question? Emmanuel Collins, do you have a question? Okay, let's go on. Now we use encryption to make sure that information is hidden from anyone who is not intended, like who we don't intend to read our document. So if we have a particular document and we just want maybe if you a couple of people to be able to access this document, we encrypt it to make sure that only authorized parties can access this document. Now, the process of changing ciphertext, remember ciphertext now is what we arrive at when we encrypt the plain text. So the process of changing the ciphertext back to the plain text is what we refer to as decryption. Now we're going to be making use of the terms like plain text, ciphertext, encryption, decryption throughout the rest of the class. So I hope by now we understand what those four things means. Now, types of cryptography. Now there are two major types of cryptography. We have the symmetric key cryptography and we have the asymmetric key cryptography. Now, symmetric key cryptography is what we also refer to as the secret key cryptography. Now, symmetric key cryptography basically uses the same key, which is what we refer to as the secret key, to encrypt and decrypt data. So we want to encrypt data, we make use of the secret key to encrypt this data. We want to decrypt the same data. As we want to change the plain text to the ciphertext now, that's encryption. We make use of the secret key to encrypt the data. Now when we want to decrypt this, when we want to decrypt this data, we make use of the secret, that's the same secret key, it has to be the same to change the ciphertext back to the plain text. So now the sender and the receiver of this data now must have the same key to be able to communicate securely. Now, this key is usually very well kept, like it's usually a very tight secret among both the sender and the receiver. Now, asymmetric key cryptography. Now, asymmetric key cryptography, also known as public key cryptography, makes use of two separate keys for both encryption and decryption. Now, the public key is used to encrypt data, and the secret key is used to decrypt data. So, the the receiver now is the owner of both the public key and the secret key. So the receiver keeps the secret key to himself and it distributes the corresponding public key. It's the corresponding public key is made public knowledge. So anybody who wants to send encrypted data to him uses the public key to encrypt this data, and this data can only be decrypted using the secret key. So this data can only be decrypted using the secret key. So we have the public key and we have the secret key in a symmetric key cryptography. So in asymmetric key cryptography, we're making use of keys here, codes by Bershania. I'll share the book he published. I'll share this book, this particular book later. Applied Cryptography, Protocols, Algorithms, and Source Codes in C. Well, I won't advise you to read it immediately. So just become very familiar with the basics first before you But this is a it's a very good textbook. It's a very good textbook. I will recommend it for you if you want to use if you want it. Now, we're moving into symmetric key cryptography. Now we have four types of symmetric key cryptography. Now we have the substitution cipher, we have the transposition cipher, we have block ciphers, and we have stream ciphers. Now we're going to be looking at these four types. We're going to be looking at examples under all four of them. So we're going to be looking at the Caesar cipher, the real fence cipher, and we're going to be looking at advanced encryption system and the Chacha cipher. Okay, let's just move on. Now we have just various forms of the such as forms of or examples of symmetric key cryptography. Now let me properly before we move on now. Let me take this time to make sure we understand what secret key cryptography is. Now, secret key cryptography, like I mentioned earlier, makes use of a single key. So we're using the same key to both encrypt data and decrypt data. So when we want to encrypt data, we use the particular secret key in question now to take this data from plain text to ciphertext. Remember, I said the plain text is the original data. That's we don't need any special tools or any special documents or any special methods to read. It's just your normal data. Then we have the ciphertext. The ciphertext is the result of encryption. It's what we get after encryption. So now, in secret key cryptography or in symmetric key cryptography now, we're using the same secret key, which is just a single key now, to encrypt data and decrypt the data. Okay, let's move on. Now, let's look at the Caesar cipher. So we're starting with substitution ciphers now. Now let's look at the Caesar cipher. Now, Caesar cipher is a simple substitution cipher that involves shifting the letters in a message by a certain number of positions. Now, it's just now what substitution cipher basically means is uh, we have let's say we have ABC now. Now we substitute those values. We substitute A for something else. We substitute B for something else. Substitute C for something else. That's basically how substitution cipher works. Now, Caesar cipher is one of the simplest forms of substitution. In fact, it's basically one of the simplest cryptography algorithms in existence. One of the simplest ciphers in existence. Now, also, I forgot to mention another name for cryptography algorithms now is what we call cipher. So you that's not I've been making mention of the word cipher now. Another word for cipher is a cryptography algorithm. So anytime I say something like the Caesar cipher now, I mean the Caesar cryptography algorithm. So in this situation now, we're talking about a cipher that was that how do I put okay, let's say a cipher that or a cryptography algorithm that is called Caesar. Now, the Caesar cipher was invented by Julius Caesar. Actually, that's why it's called Caesar cipher. It's used during the time during ancient Rome. He used it to communicate between his generals. So they basically used it to scribble their communications. Now, in the Caesar cipher, the only thing that changes is letters. So if I have, for example, let's say I have a message. Okay. Uh, okay, let me say I want to say add 3, 5. So let me drop that in the income message so that you see what I'm talking about now. So I wanted to send a message like this to someone, add 3, 5. I'm using a Caesar cipher, and let's say I want to use a shift of let me use a simple one, a shift of 1. Now, Caesar cipher, the secret key is called the shift. So if the shift is 1, the secret key here is 1. Or if the shift is 10, the secret key is 10. So let me just use something simple. I want to use a secret key of 1 now. So in this case, the shift is 1. Now, in the Caesar cipher, when the shift is 1, A becomes B, B becomes C, C becomes D, D becomes E. So we're moving everything to the right, one value to the right. That's what it means by shift of one. Now, if it's a shift of two, we're moving everything to the right. We're moving it from the right by two places. So A becomes C, and B becomes D, like that, exactly. So if we're using, wait, you can't see my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
David, it's probably your network. Now, if we're using a scissor cipher and we're using a shift of, now, Adedeji Imano. Now, remember I said that in scissor cipher, only the letters are affected. So your cipher text is kind of correct, except for the last two values. It should be BEE 3, 5. You don't change numbers in scissor cipher, so you only change the letters. Did you understand that? Emmanuel, did you understand? Let me be sure you understood that before I move on. Okay, he's not replying. Let me just go on. So only the letters are affected. You don't. Now I said in the scissor cipher, only letters are
Yeah,
affected.
I understand now.
Okay. You only change the letters. Wherever you see numbers, the numbers remain the same. So if for example now the message says add, let me give another example. We have add 133. Now, and I'm using a shift of, let me use a shift of 2 this time. Remember I said if we're using a shift of 1, we move everything to the right by 1. So A becomes B, B becomes C, C becomes D, D becomes E. Now, if you're changing everything, that's if you're using a shift of 2 now, we change everything by 2 values. So A becomes C, B becomes D, C becomes E, D becomes F. So add 133, the new message would now be, now we're using a shift of 2, remember, so the new message will now be CFF 133. Anony, do you understand? Do you understand? Okay, good. Now, the scissor cipher is one of the it's very easy. Like I said, it's one of the easiest to implement, one of the easiest to understand. That is why it is not used in modern computing. So yeah, Ramon, if it's when you get to Z, you go back to the top. So in this case now, if you're using a shift of 2, Y will become A, then Z will become B. Ramon, do you understand? Okay, now, yeah, I've not changed the slide. I'm only showing the scissor cipher slide. So just when I change the slide, you see I'm only showing the scissor cipher slide. Now, the scissor cipher now you shouldn't use scissor cipher in production. It's just basically an example. In fact, let me we don't, in modern cryptography, we no longer make use of substitution ciphers or transposition ciphers. And we only use that to just introduce people to cryptography. Now, the reason we don't use them is because they are relatively very easy to crack. So if you want to make use of secret key cryptography in production or in real life now, you should be making use of ciphers like AES, DES, or things in that. So you're making use of block ciphers or string ciphers. We no longer make use of substitution and transposition ciphers. Now, not because they're not useful, but because they are relatively easy to crack. Now, if you're dealing with remember the quote I showed us by okay, let me go back to the quote now. Yeah. Now, by Brishania, there are two kinds of cryptography. Cryptography that will stop your kid sister from reading your files, and cryptography that will stop major governments from reading your files. Now, if you were dealing with your kid sister in this situation now, a substitution cipher will be relatively would do. Now, if you're dealing with I don't know, if you were just playing around with cryptography, a substitution cipher or a transition cipher would be okay for you. But if you wanted to deal with, like, if you were implementing some very serious security protocols now, or you were dealing with some very serious security issues, or you wanted to encrypt some very important, some very sensitive documents now, you would have to deal with uh, some wider algorithms like block ciphers and stream ciphers. So let's move on. Now, let's move to transposition cipher. In this case, the real fence cipher. Now, the real fence cipher is a simple transposition cipher that writes the plain text down in zigzag patterns across a number of rails or lines, and then reads off the cipher text by reading each rail in order. Now, this is one of the simplest form of transmission ciphers available, and though it is not secure enough to be used in production, it's a great tool to teach introduction to cryptography. So just like the Caesar cipher now, the real fence cipher cannot be used in production. Remember, I told you no longer make use of substitution and transposition ciphers in production. Now, the real fence cipher is a relatively simple cipher. So we have now, remember I said in the Caesar cipher now, the secret key in the case of the Caesar cipher is the shift value. So if you are shifting by 3, your secret key is 3. Now in the real fence cipher, the secret key is the number of rails you are using, or the number of lines you are using. So in this case now, if we're working with 2 rails or 2 lines now, the secret key would be 2. If we're working with 3 lines, the secret key would be 3. Now, if you want to properly understand the real fence cipher, you can make your research, Google search, and read up on it. I'll share some articles. I don't know. I'll check and see if you could get some articles on it, and I'll share those articles later. Now let's move into much more recent ciphers we use today. Okay, now the advanced encryption system. Now, the advanced encryption system was built to replace the data encryption system. So the data encryption is the predecessor of the advanced encryption system. Now this is the one that has been mostly used even by some major governments. So AES is a symmetric encryption system that is widely used to protect sensitive information. Now, AES is an example of a block cipher. Now, DES also, yeah, that is the data encryption system, is also an example of block cipher. So AES is also an example of a block cipher. Now, it was developed by 2 Belgian cryptographers, Joan Dimin and Vincent Widman. Now, the advanced encryption system works by doing a bunch of complex mathematics on your plain text and on your secret key. Now, the advanced encryption system takes in the plain text and your secret key as inputs, and then it applies a round of substitution, permutation, and XOR operations to transform the plain text into a ciphertext. Now, the ciphertext can only be decrypted into the plain text by using the same secret key. Now, the AES algorithm works on a block of 128 bits at a time, but it supports 3 sizes, which is the 128 bits, the 192 bits, and the 256 bits. Now, the larger the block size, the more secure the encryption. So just know that in the AES system, in fact, I think in DES also, I'm not really sure, but in AES, I can say for certain that the larger the block size. So that means that 256 bits is more secure than the 192 bits, and the 192 bit is more secure than the 128 bit. Now, the 128 bit is the least secure in the advanced encryption in the advanced encryption system, but it's still very secure. I can assure you of that. Now, let's move on to stream ciphers. Now, let's look at the Chacha cipher. Now, the Chacha cipher is a stream cipher that is designed to provide high security and performance on a variety of platforms. Now, it was developed by Daniel J. Benson in 2008 to replace the RC4 stream cipher. Now, Chacha works by taking a 256-bit secret key and a 96-bit nonce. Now, a nonce means a number that is only used once. So after it is used, it is forgotten or it is deleted. So it takes this 256-bit secret key and the 96-bit nonce, and then generates a sequence of pseudo-random numbers, which is what we refer to as the key stream. And then it's now this key stream is what is used to encrypt and decrypt data. So now the key stream is generated by taking the 256-bit secret key and the 96-bit nonce, and it is used to generate the key stream. And the key stream is what we use to encrypt and decrypt data. Now, the teacher cipher is highly flexible and can be configured to support different security levels and performance characteristics. Now, it is designed to be fast and efficient on a wide variety of platforms, including software and hardware. Now, Teacher Cipher is one of the fastest modern. It's one of the fastest ciphers in modern cryptography. So it's relatively very far. How fast can I say? Hey, let me not put a number to it. Let me not compare it. Let me just say it's fast. That's all you really need to know. Now, uh, implementing ciphers like the Caesar cipher or the Wilfen cipher now it will be relatively very easy. In fact, I would advise you to try your hands on it. If you Google search how to implement uh, the Caesar cipher or the Wilfen cipher in Python, you should be able to get instructional materials on that, and they are relatively very easy. How easy will I compare it to now? Okay, let me just say they are quite very easy. Now you should consider adding those to your portfolio. So you should try implementing the Caesar cipher and the Rufen cipher and consider adding to your portfolio. Now, the advanced encryption system and Twitter cipher, on the other hand, uh, require a bit of complex mathematical. Require a bit of complex mathematics and a little bit of advanced Python knowledge. So I would not really advise you to try uh, implementing it in Python. You should try and familiarize yourself with the language first and cryptography generally before you should try implementing them in Python. So just understand how the algorithm works and understand how the algorithm works before you go ahead to try and implement it. Now, the strengths of secret key cryptography. Now, secret cryptography is the fastest. I should tell you now. It's faster than public cryptography because it's using a single key to encrypt and decrypt data. So all you just need is one key. Now, using one key means you need less computational resources. Now, less computational resources means it runs faster. Now, efficiency. Now, secret key cryptography is efficient because it requires fewer resources than public key cryptography. This makes it suitable for applications with limited computational power and limited memory. Now, security. Symmetric cryptography can provide strong security if implemented correctly. So, if you use long random keys and you use you make your encryption algorithm to be robust. Now, uh, also the security of secret key cryptography is dependent on how safe you keep the key in this situation. So, if for example your key is exposed, anyone who gets access to your ciphertext can read the plain text if he knows the algorithm you used and the secret key you use. So the secret key is usually kept as a very tight secret. Now, let's look at the downsides or the weaknesses of secret key cryptography. Now, key management. So that is like the number one challenge of secret key cryptography. Now, one of the main challenges of secret key cryptography is the secure distribution and management of secret keys. Now, if your secret key is compromised, it can be used to decrypt all messages encrypted with that key. So you should keep your secret key very safe. So now the second one is key exchange. Now, secret key cryptography requires a secure exchange of keys between parties, which can be challenging if the parties don't meet in person. The internet is just one big ball of insecurity, and we should know that by now. So sharing information, sensitive information, such as the secret key for our encryption through the internet is not so. We have to then consider making use of physical carriers or physical couriers. Now, if the courier is not trusted, that's another situation on its own. So if you're using a courier who we don't trust to share our secret key, there is a risk of our secret key getting into the wrong hand, and they can then decrypt every communication between myself and the GDS need for backup. Now, limited scalability, which is the third one. Now, symmetric key cryptography is not easily scalable to a large network or multiple users. Now, each pair of users will require a separate key for communication, which can be difficult to manage and distribute securely. So when you have multiple users, so if I wanted to communicate with let's say 3, 4, 5 different GDS dates now, which I don't know that is still manageable. I could create separate keys for. I would not. I could now. I would have to create separate keys to communicate with each of these GDS leads individually. Now, if I wanted to take it to and I wanted to take it on a large scale and say I wanted to communicate with all the GDS leads in Africa. So I want to take it I want to take it to not to take it a notch and say I want to communicate with all the GDS leads in Africa. Now there are over 100 GDS leads in Africa alone. So communicating with all the GDS leads and creating a separate secret key for all the GDS leads would be very massive. It would be a lot of work to implement. E- the more GDS leads I had, the more difficult it is to manage communication with all of these GDS leads. So, managing communication between large parties is very difficult when you're using. Secret key cryptography. Now, let's look at asymmetric cryptography.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions on secret key cryptography? Just let me see your hands. Just read your hands. If you have any questions on secret key cryptography, you could just okay. David, what's your question?
The last time we held the class, you were doing something like the coding part of this, which made it get interesting. All of this theory. What I've actually been doing was reading the materials, the slides, then the same thing with the YouTube links you gave to us. It was just all theory. Like I think it would get cooler if we can get to that theory part. So thank you.
No, if I were to do the practical part, most people are not very familiar. That's the reason why most people are not very familiar with the Python programming language yet. So, doing the practical part, uh, it could get complex. But let's see. Let's now, if the majority of the class wants us to do the practical part, I'm sure I can go ahead and show us the practical aspect. So, by show of hands, let me see. If you want us to do the practical part, just raise your hands. Let's see. You guys are the one deciding now. Let's see how many hands are raised. If you want us to go ahead and do the practical aspects, raise your hands.
Like please go from scratch actually. Not necessarily, it does not you don't necessarily have to put us through the Python, but then for us to actually be able to follow up with what you're doing such that we can actually get the same responses ourselves on our system. That's what I'm actually after, sir.
But I could share you resources on how to do that. So
I suppose that would be perfect then, sir.
okay, so
Thank
I will
you.
share you guys resources on how to implement some of these algorithms with Python. I think that's better, right? I think that's better. Okay, now, please, everyone, you can drop your hand. You can drop your hands. Now, Anthony, you asked if key exchange is done via SSH, would it be more secure? Okay, now, it will be more secure if you do it through SSH, but you should also know that SSH uh, could be could be attacked also, and you key could be exposed even through SSH. So there is no system that is 100% secure. So far, it's communication over the internet. You should consider that it's not secure. So key exchange via SSH, fine, fine. Yeah, it will be more secure than sending it through a WhatsApp message. So it's you'll be generally more secure than sending the key through WhatsApp message. So yes, through SSH would be more secure. Yeah. Okay. SSH. What is SSH? Let me see if I can explain that in clear terms. Now, SSH is SSH. It's okay. Now, SSH basically stands for secure shell. So SSH is a network protocol that is used for secure remote access over an unsecured network. Now, it allows you to log in and control a remote computer securely. So using encryption to protect the authentication and data transmission. SSH it's commonly used by system administrators and software developers to access and manage remote servers and devices, as well as transfer files between these devices securely. Now, it supports a few stuff like tunneling. Now, it's SSH allows you to create secure connections between different over an unsecured network. Now, we should know that SSH just know that it stands for secure shell, and it allows you to communicate between multiple devices over. It allows you to communicate over multiple devices over an unsecure network. So that's basically what SSH is. So, David, have I answered your question? David, have I answered your question? Okay. Williams, okay, do you have a question? Your hand is raised. Williams, okay, do you have a
No, I have none. No, I have none.
Okay, please drop your hand if you don't have a question. Thank you. Okay, now let's move on to the next thing now. We're moving into asymmetric key cryptography now. Now, asymmetric key cryptography is also known as public cryptography. Now, it's a type of cryptographic system that uses two keys. Now, it makes use of a public key and a secret key. Now, it uses the public key to encrypt data, and it uses the secret key to decrypt data. Now, the public key is publicly available and distributed to anyone who wants to send encrypted data to the owner of the key. Now, the secret key, on the other hand, is only known to the owner of the key. And the secret key can be used to decrypt any data that has been encrypted using the corresponding public key. So, if now to solve the issue of key management and key distribution between multiple GDS threads, for example, I could just create a secret key and a public key, and I give all the 100 GDS leads the public key. Whenever they want to send data to me, they use my public key to encrypt data and send the cipher text to me, and I use the secret key, which is only known to me, to decrypt data that has been sent using the public key. Now, The strength of the public key lies in the fact that it is computationally, should I say impossible now? It's almost impossible. Now, it's almost impossible to derive the private key from the public key. Now, they are almost independent of each other. So, even if the encrypted communication is intercepted, it will be impossible to decrypt that data just because you know the public key. Now, the public key can be known by anyone. Anybody is allowed to know the public key. Because the moment you know the public key, that means you can send secure communication to me, and I can decrypt that secure communication using the secret key which is only known to me, and I don't need to share my secret key with you. All you just need to know is the public key. That public key is known by a bunch of people, like almost everybody's allowed to know my public key. But the thing is, it's computationally difficult to derive the private key from the public key. So even if you know the public key, it will be almost impossible. Let me say almost impossible for you to decrypt the communication because you know the public key. Now, let's look at examples of the asymmetric key cryptography algorithm. Now, let's look at the first one, which is the RSA. Now, RSA is an acronym for the name of three inventors: Ron Roosevelt, Adi Samir, and Leonard Alderman. Now, RSA is based on the mathematical difficulty of factoring the product of two large prime numbers, which is used to generate the public and private keys. So, mathematically, it is impossible to factor the product. It is possible to find all the factors of the product of two very large prime numbers. So that's basically what the RSA cipher is built on. That fact. So the security of the RSA relies on the fact that it's computationally infeasible to factor the product of two large prime numbers. Now, the RSA algorithm is used for both encryption and digital signatures. Now, encryption and decryption is basically what we've been doing since. Now, digital signatures is one of the many applications of the asymmetric key cryptography. The digital signature is basically just how do I put it now? Let's see. So if I have a work now, or let me think of analogy I could use. So okay, yes. Let me just go straight to point and explain. Now, digital signatures is a mathematical technique used to validate the authenticity of a document. So if I send you a document and I used asymmetric key cryptography to encrypt this document, you uh, can verify if this document is authentically from that's if it's from me, you can verify if the document was originally from me using my public key. So I use my private key to encrypt this document now, and I send the document to you, or I use my private key to encrypt the document and I send the document to you. You use the public key to confirm if this document is really from me. So it's used to verify if the document is originally from someone. So they are created using a private key that is unique to the signer and can only be decrypted using the public key. Now, remember in asymmetric key cryptography, encryption is done using the public key and decryption is done using the private key. Now, with digital signatures now, it's a little, in fact, it's the exact opposite with digital signatures. With digital signatures, encryption is done using the private key and decryption is done using the public key. So digital signature is generated by combining the documents with the private key in a cryptographic hash function, which we will not be explaining today, by the way. Okay, let me try and explain hash function. I think I'm digressing a lot now. Now, hash function is a mathematical function that converts input data into a fixed size output, which is called a hash value, or we simply call it a hash. So in digital signatures now, we are combining the document and this private key to generate a hash function, which will result in a fixed length string that is unique to the document and the signer's private key. So for every document and for every document now, there is a different hash. Remember, the hash function now generates a hash value. So for every document, there is a different hash value. So with this hash value, now you can really confirm that, okay, this document is from so person. You guys understand that? Did you guys understand? Let me be sure you guys understood everything I said. Okay, now, remember I said RSA is used for both encryption and digital signatures. Now, to encrypt a message using RSA, the sender uses the recipient's public key to encrypt the message, and then the recipient uses their private key to decrypt the message. To create a digital signature, on the other hand, the sender hashes the message and encrypts the hash with their private key, which can then be verified by anyone with the sender's public key. So anybody with my public key can confirm that yes, this document is really from so person. Okay, now let's move on. We have the elliptic curve cryptography. Now, the elliptic curve cryptography is also another form of asymmetric key cryptography. Now, the elliptical cryptography is a type of public key level of security as RSA, but uses smaller key sizes, which makes it faster and more efficient. Now, the security of ECC relies on the elliptic curve discrete logarithmic problem. Now, which is the difficulty of finding the discrete logarithm of a point on an elliptic curve over a finite field. Now, the strength of the encryption depends on the size of the elliptic curve and the parameters used to generate the keys. Now, from RSA and elliptic curve cryptography now, we can, okay, what does it mean by hash of a message now? Okay, now in hash functions now, when we're working with hash functions, we generate something called the hash value or a hash. Now, the hash of a message is the result of the hash function. David Favor, have I answered your question? David Favor, have I answered your question? Okay. Now, from RSA and elliptic curve cryptography, we can find a pattern in most modern asymmetric key cryptography algorithms. Now, we can find that in asymmetric key cryptography, we tend to be working towards the problems that we tend to be working towards complex mathematical problems and the difficulty of solving them. So in RSA now, it is almost impossible to find, not almost now, it is computationally impossible to find the factors of the product of two large prime numbers. And that is what the RSA uses to encrypt and decrypt data. Now, in the elliptic curve cryptography now, we can see that we're working based on the difficulty that we a point on an elliptic curve over a finite field. So that's basically what we're working with when we're working with elliptic curve cryptography. Now, the strengths of public key cryptography. So, key distribution number one. So, public key cryptography doesn't have the problem of having to share secret key between multiple parties. So, key distribution is very simple. Just share your public key on the internet. So, anybody who wants to send encrypted communication to you can do so using your public key. and all you just have to do is decrypt using your private key. So you keep your private key secret to yourself. So you're the only one who knows your private key. Now, security. Public cryptography is based on complex mathematical problems that are difficult or almost impossible to solve, providing a high level of security. Now, the use of large key sizes and robust encryption algorithms can make it almost impossible to break asymmetric key cryptography algorithm. Now, digital signatures. Public key cryptography allows for the creation of digital signatures which can be used to verify the authenticity and integrity of messages and documents. Now, this is particularly useful for e-commerce and other applications where secure authentication is critical. Now, let's look at the weaknesses of public key cryptography. Performance. Now, public key cryptography is generally slower than symmetric key cryptography due to the use of larger key sizes and more complex algorithms. Now, this can be an issue in applications where real-time encryption and decryption are required. So, in applications where you need to work with real-time encryption and real-time, so you need to decrypt and you have to encrypt and decrypt information in real time. That's the moment the document is being sent, you have to encrypt it, and the moment it's being received, you have to decrypt it. Or situations like real-time communication, you have to deal with the issue of the speed or the performance issue in public key cryptography. Now let's move on to key management. The security of public key cryptography relies heavily on the secure management of private keys. If a private key is compromised, an attacker can potentially read all encrypted messages sent to that key. So, key management can be a complex and challenging task for any cryptographer. Now, uh, public key cryptography algorithms are vulnerable to quantum computing. So, public key cryptography algorithms like RSA and ECC are vulnerable to quantum computing attacks, which can potentially break the underlying mathematical problem. So with quantum computing, you can solve some very complex mathematical problems. So as quantum computing becomes more advanced, public key cryptography may become less secure and require new algorithms to be developed. Now, that is all with public key. That's all on introduction to cryptography. Now, does anyone have any questions? If you have any questions, please raise your hands. Yeah, sure. The slides will be shared. If you have any questions, please raise your hands. Even if it's not with today's class, any other question, like questions on cybersecurity, even if it's not concerned with today's class, if you have any question on cybersecurity, shoot, ask your questions. Just raise your hands. Okay, so I take it there are no questions. Okay. Yeah, someone asked this question in the last class. Now, okay, yeah, I'll share the attendance soon. Okay. Now, is it possible to double encrypt or triple encrypt a message for better security? Well, yes, it is possible to double encrypt and triple encrypt. In fact, you can use multiple encryption algorithms on a single data. So, this is it here. When you have a data you want to when you have a data you want to encrypt. So, for example, I have data I want to encrypt, and I want to encrypt using multiple. Let's say I want to encrypt using RSA and ECC now. First step I take is to encrypt using RSA, and then for the next step, I encrypt using ECC, right? Now, after doing that now, to decrypt now, remember ECC, I used ECC to encrypt last. So I use ECC to decrypt first, and I use RCC to decrypt last. So I have RSA to decrypt last. Sorry. So I used RSA to encrypt first, and ECC. So it's just about order. Whatever you use to decrypt first is what you use to decrypt last. So you just need to understand the order in which you did the encryption and decryption. Um, Salam Abdul, have I answered your question? Okay, yeah. Okay, so I have answered your question. Now, okay, let me first of all, before I continue answering your questions, let me drop the link for the attendance. So I just dropped the link to the attendance in the income messages. So just check it and fill out the attendance. Okay, now for the next question, Anony, what is the difference between a VPN and a proxy? Okay. Now by now I expect all of us to be familiar with what VPN. In fact, we should all be familiar with what VPNs are. So we most of us use VPNs every day. So we should know that a VPN is now a VPN stands for virtual private network. Now they are both tools that are used to browse the internet anonymously and access content that may be restricted to a particular region. Now, however, they are both they differ in function. Now, let me start with a proxy. Okay, let me start with a proxy. Now, a proxy acts as an intermediary between your internet traffic is routed through the server, which can mask your IP address and hide your online identity or your online activity. Now, proxies do not offer encryption and may not provide as strong a security as VPN. So VPN are basically more secure than proxies. Now, a VPN, on the other hand, it creates an encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. Sorry. Now, this tunnel encrypts all your internet traffic and makes it difficult for anyone to intercept and monitor your activity. Now, VPN also offer a wider range of server locations and typically provide stronger security and privacy protection than proxies. So they basically do the same thing. Both of them mask your identity, but VPNs are much more secure than proxies. I don't know if I answered your question. I don't know if I answered your question. Okay, good. Okay, now for the next question, how effective is real-time cryptography against man-in-the-middle attack? Okay. Uh, Now Cryptography basically can be very effective against any attack if implemented correctly. So real-time cryptography involves encrypting and decrypting data on the fly. So basically, the moment you're sending data, you're encrypting it like that, and the moment you're receiving it, you're decrypting it. So data, which means that any data that is intercepted by a potential attacker during transmission will basically useless without the decryption key. So the moment the information leaves your system, it's encrypted. So when you have a man in the middle now, he basically just receives a packet and it's basically useless to him because he doesn't have the decryption key. The moment another data is entering with the same encryption and same secret key and decryption key now, it is decrypted. So real-time encryption and decryption on the fly. That's basically the whole logic behind real-time cryptography. Now, excuse me. So real-time cryptography can okay. So the effectiveness of real-time cryptography it depends on a lot actually. So how strong is your encryption algorithm for starters? What is the size of your key? What is the randomness of your key generation? Did you generate a key that is related to you, or you just generated a random key? The key generation, that's the randomness of the key generation process. The security of key exchange. So it depends on all those factors. So if a user or if the attacker has access to the user's private key, or if they can bypass the encryption process through other means, such as maybe exploiting a vulnerability in your encryption protocol. So if your encryption algorithm is weak, if your encryption algorithm is not secure enough to resist or if the attacker can find a loophole in your encryption, uh, then it's basically useless. Your encryption and encryption is basically useless against man-in-the-middle attacks. So real-time cryptography actually is a very effective uh, countermeasure against man-in-the-middle attacks. So it could be combined with other security measures, though, such as secure key exchange, proper key management, and vulnerability management. So to provide comprehensive protection, you have to uh, check and make sure that your encryption algorithm is very secure. Key exchange is very secure. So your key exchange mechanism is secure. Your key is a random key, not just something that can easily be that's something that can be socially engineered. So not just a key that could be gotten through social engineering. The key size is large enough to, or let's just say you have a relatively large key size, and you're using I already mentioned a very secure encryption algorithm. So, the Benny, have I answered your question? Okay, good. So, okay, trust and favor. Can you make use of a real life? Excuse me. Okay, so your question, can you make use of a real life example to better explain RSA? Okay, let's see a real life example. Real life example. Okay. Okay. Now let's see. Let's say, for example, okay, the most common examples that are being used that is used in cybersecurity, the Alice and Bob example. So Alice wants to send a confidential message to Bob. Now Alice uses an RSA encryption to protect the message. Bob creates a public and a private key. Bob creates a public and a private key. Now he keeps the private key secret and distributes his public key to Alice and anyone else who wants to send him a message. No, to encrypt the message, Alice takes Bob's public key and uses it to encrypt a message. Now Bob receives the encrypted message, the ciphertext in this case, and uses his private key to decrypt it. Now, this ensures that only Bob can read the message, as is the only person who has access to the private key. So, for example, Alice wants to send hello Bob to Bob. So Bob creates a public and private key. Now he keeps the private key secret and gives Alice the public key. Alice takes Bob's public key and encrypts a message using RSA encryption. Now, the RSA encryption can generate just a random gibberish, just something basically useless to the eye. So you just send a bunch of random text. So she sends this encrypted text to Bob. Bob receives that text and uses his private key to decrypt it. So only Bob can decrypt the message using this RSA algorithm. Now, RSA algorithm uses complex mathematics. So the complex mathematics in this case is based on the fact that it is computationally, with modern day computing I'm talking about now, not with future tech computer. So in modern day computing, it's computationally impossible to find the factors of the product of two very large prime numbers. Favor, have I answered your question? Okay, now, which software would you advise me to install first as a beginner? I installed Python with no idea of what to do with it, and I got more confused when people talked about other softwares like Ubuntu and all. Kindly do justice to what I'll be needing those softwares for. Thank you. Okay, now, as a beginner in cybersecurity, okay, now Python is recommended as a as a programming language speaker because it is relatively beginner friendly and it has application in basically almost every field in technology. It's used in cloud engineering, web development, machine learning, artificial intelligence, our own cybersecurity, and many more other fields like that. So Python Python is recommended as the first programming language you should pick up for cybersecurity because it is relatively easy to use. Now, as a security personnel, you will need to familiarize yourself with using Linux based commands. So, for example, now you have commands like change directory. So, when you're working in cybersecurity, for example, let me make use of cloud security, for example. Now, I'm making use of cloud security because in cloud security, it is very, 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 very compulsory for you to understand how Linux works. So Ubuntu is an example of a Linux distribution. Now, Linux is divided into there are many different Linux distributions. We have Kali Linux, we have Ubuntu, we have Arc, we have okay, there are many other different. I can't remember. We have Mint, as Linux Mint. We have Ubuntu Lite or is it Ubuntu Lite? But we have many. We have Parrot OS also. So there are many different types of Linux distributions. There are many different types of Linux distributions, and Ubuntu is one of the lighter and easier ones to understand. That's why it's recommended that you install Ubuntu. Now, Ubuntu is an operating system. Just so you know, Ubuntu is an operating system. You're going to be needing Python, you're going to be needing Ubuntu to be able to uh, basically to be able to get started in cybersecurity field. So if you have those two, you are good to go. So just learn Python, learn Ubuntu, like learn Linux generally, or but in this case now Ubuntu, learn how it works, learn the protocols, learn how it works, learn how to get root access, learn how to check who you are on the system, or if check, learn how to check if you're working as root, learn the basic commands of Ubuntu and how to do different things on the Linux terminal, basically. So if you understand that, you'll be able to work with many other Linux You'll be able to work with many other Linux distributions. Now, so if you understand those two, just those are the two things you need for now. So have I answered your question? Apart Isiaka Abiola. Have I answered your question? Okay, good. Okay, next question. Yeah, I will send the slides to the group after once the class is over. What's your take on C++ with scripting and hacking? Okay. Remember, I said Python is recommended because it's beginner friendly, right? So if you understand Python, you basically be able to pick up any other language. Now, Python is a multi-purpose part, a very powerful programming language, and it's multi-purpose. So if you understand Python, you should be able to pick up any other language. So Python can be used for scripting. Also, C++ can also be used for scripting and hacking. C++ is a little bit advanced. Uh, so I would advise you stay in Python. When you're done learning Python, you learn C. I would recommend C than C++ because C++ is kind of object oriented and C deals more with procedural programming than C++. So I advise you understand C programming before you decide to jump into C++. Anoni, Anoni, have I answered your question? Anoni, have I answered your question? Okay. Someone was raising hand now. What was that?
Yes, it was me.
Okay.
Please, just can you just briefly like explain, just briefly like asymmetric and asymmetric, symmetric and asymmetric cryptography, just like so in an easier format to understand.
In an easier format to understand. Okay. So this is it here. Symmetric key cryptography, also known as secret key cryptography, is basically when you take a secret key now and you use that same secret key to encrypt and decrypt data using the same secret key. Then asymmetric is the opposite. Remember, secret key uses one. Asymmetric, also known as public key, uses two keys. You have the public key and you have the secret key or the private key now. Now, the private key is kept to yourself. You don't share the private key to anybody. But the public key, you share it to anybody who wants to use it to send encrypted communication to you. So the public key, you can give it to anybody. But the private key belongs to you. So if I wanted to send an encrypted communication to you, all you have to do is take your public key, encrypt the data using your public key, and send the encrypted data to you. And then you use your private key to decrypt that data. That is asymmetric key cryptography. Have I answered your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Next question. About Python, can you tell me different aspects it can be used on? People say it can be used to anything, but people still recommend not learning it as the first language, not learning it as the first language, which is very confusing. Okay. Now, Python is an example of what we call a multi-purpose programming language. It has many applications. Now, recommending Python as the first language depends on the field you are going into. For example, if you're going into web development, taking Python as a first language would be a very, very wrong thing to do. If you're going into web development, it is expected that your first programming language should be JavaScript. Now, I'm saying JavaScript in the sense that HTML and CSS are not actually considered programming language. HTML is a markup language, CSS is a styling language, JavaScript is a programming language. So your first programming language should be JavaScript if you are going into web development. Now, if you are going into a field like cybersecurity or machine learning and artificial intelligence, or cloud engineering, you are expected that Python should be your first language. So it is depending on the field you want to go to. So each choice of language is track specific. Then it also depends on what you find easier, but still there is a recommended first language for every track. So for web development, it's JavaScript. For machine learning and artificial intelligence, it's Python. For cybersecurity, it's Python. For cloud engineering, it is Python. For game development, it is C and C++. For which other field can I use? Huh? For backend development, it is JavaScript. So it's basically depending on the track you are going into. Asymmetric encryption can be likened to a mailbox on the street. The mailbox is completely public. Anyone who knows the location could go to it and drop in a letter. However, only the owner of the mailbox has a key that allows him to access it and read exactly. Ishola, thank you for this. This is better. This is better, and this is a very good, example of a symmetric key. So, are there any other questions?
Can we make like ask any like a career advice for some career advice?
Career advice. Okay, before I get to career advice, let me answer this question. After learning Python, what language would you recommend? After learning Python, I would recommend learning C programming. It has very wide applications in cybersecurity, especially in cryptography. So you should learn C programming. Yes. Okay, now let's go back to career advice. Now, there are many career advice. There are many very career opportunities in cybersecurity. Now, it all depends on you and what you find interesting. Okay. We have uh, penetration tester. We have security analyst. We have chief security. We have cryptographer. I said after learning Python, you could go on and learn C programming because C programming has a lot of application, especially in cryptography. So you can become a cryptographer. You can become a teacher. Yeah, you can become a teacher. You could teach. You could teach cybersecurity. Also, so it's depending on what interests you. For example, I am not a pen tester. I am not a cryptographer. I am a researcher. So I basically what I just do is I research cybersecurity and I research how to get weaknesses or how to better protect our systems. I'm currently working on one research and it's based on using artificial intelligence to better protect our systems. So it's basically depends on you and what interests you. So Mohammed, I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Idris, do you have a question? Idris, do you have a question? Idris, are you with us? Your hand is raised. Do you have a question? It doesn't seem he's with us. Okay, so yeah. Anoni, is there a way to stop zero-day attacks? Okay, now zero-day attacks are a particularly very challenging kind of attack to stop because zero-day attacks exploit vulnerabilities we didn't even know existed. So stopping zero-day attacks is mostly about prevention. It's okay. You Idris, you can go ahead and type a question in the income message at one time if you're having network issues. So zero-day attacks are more about prevention than stopping it. So we can prevent zero-day attack. We can try and prevent zero-day attacks by, first of all, updating our systems and software. So always ensure that latest security patches are up to date. Always make sure that your softwares and your systems are up to date. Implement some very strong security measures, such as firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and antivirus softwares. Now, also make use of network segmentation to limit the attack surface and prevent attackers from moving laterally within the network. Also, implement strong authentication and access control to prevent unauthorized
I'm reading
access. So,
577.
so it's really more about prevention. So, zero-day attacks are really more about prevention than stopping it. Okay, anything else? So I need someone to please help me with the. Thank you. I, okay, I'll see if I can get the link and drop it on the group. What type of encryption is end-to-end encryption? Okay, what's that? Yeah. Okay, so when they say something is end-to-end encrypted, it basically means that the service provider cannot access what is the service provider can basically not access. So okay, okay, let me put it like this now. End-to-end encryption means that data is encrypted between the sender and the intended recipient. So when the sender encrypts data, when the sender sends a data now, it is encrypted and can only be decrypted by the recipient. So even the service provider cannot cannot access the encrypted information. So it ensures that data is not accessible to any intermediate parties. That includes the service provider. So end-to-end encryption means that data is encrypted between the sender and the recipient. So not even the service provider has access to the encrypted data. End-to-end encryption is a combination of symmetric and asymmetric algorithms to encrypt and decrypt data, which ensures a bit of confidentiality and integrity. So it's end-to-end encryption is considered. I say it's considered a form now. I can put it as it's considered a form of symmetric key encryption. Who asked that question? Mohammed, have I answered your question? Now, brief explanation of or implementation of the DDoS attack. Okay. Ajiri, it will be posted on YouTube. I'm not the one in charge of that. So whenever the person in charge of that is done, whenever the person in charge of that is done, we'll post it on YouTube. Implementation of the DDoS. Okay. I'll come back to the implementation of DDoS attacks now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like ask a very complicated. What I meant was like, is it like, can you like just explain like, is it
Oh, you didn't
what
mean
type of machine is it that DDoS work on?
Okay. Okay. I'll come back to your question now. If it's end-to-end encrypted and only senders and receiver can view it, how do third parties get to spy on the messages? Okay. Do Christopher, your question is basically that's your question brings in cryptanalysis now. So remember, cryptanalysis is the process of breaking down breaking down secure communication, right? Now, cryptography is the process of sending secure communication. No. analyst, it's my job to try and break down secure communications and access data that is there, even though I am not supposed to be accessing it. So I'm an attacker basically. Yeah. So spy tools basically spy tools that's basically how spy tools work. So spy tools try as much as possible to break down the end-to-end encryption between the sender and receiver and access the encrypted data in these algorithms. I've answered your question, Drew. So, Drew, Christopher, I hope I've answered your question. Okay, so explanation of DDoS attacks. Okay. Now, what are DDoS attacks? What are DDoS attacks? Now, DDoS attacks, it's. Does someone have a question? Okay, so let me just go on. Now, DDoS attack is a type of cyber attack where the attacker floods a targeted website or an online service with massive amounts of traffic or requests. Now, what the attacker is trying to do here is to make sure that the targeted system is overwhelmed and their resources such as their server or their database becomes unavailable to the intended user. So basically, I'm just if I'm an attacker now and I'm attacking the server, I just basically just storm a server repeatedly until they can no longer do what until that server can no longer do what it's supposed to be doing because it's busy handling the millions of requests I'm sending towards it. Now, DDoS attacks can be launched by multiple methods, but the most common one is what we call botnets. So it's using an interconnection of various computers, which we call bots in this case, or a network of various computers, which we call bots, to storm a server. So a botnet is a group of infected computers. So each bot can be remotely controlled by an attacker to launch an attack. So we have other types. So apart from botnets, we have something we call the amplification attack, which is one of my favorite actually, because amplification attacks use vulnerable servers to amplify attack traffic. So we're not using an interconnection of computers now. What I'm just doing is accessing a server and I'm making just one request. I'm using that server to amplify that single request to make it look like I'm sending 1,000 different requests at once. So if I send 10 requests to that to my application server now, I am basically sending about 100,000 requests or 10,000 requests to my target server. So I'm using a vulnerable server now. So I'm using a vulnerable server to amplify the attack traffic. While reflection attacks, on the other hand, now, which is another type, use legitimate servers to reflect the attack traffic toward the targeted system. So we have there are other various types also. So, but DDoS attacks, the main aim of DDoS attacks is basically to just make sure that the server is unaccessible to those who are actually supposed to be using it. So, Mohammed, if I answered your question.
Yes, sir, very much. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much, sir. I now understand it very much.
Please, what are the advantages and disadvantages of using VirtualBox without VMware? Well, okay. Now, if you are on Mac, you don't necessarily need. If you want to, you can go ahead. You can use any one of them, VirtualBox and VM. I can't really answer that question because I have never used a virtual machine before. I usually just install the OS directly on my system. VirtualBox is enough. So you could just ask from people who are familiar with using virtual machines. But really, if you use Mac doesn't. You don't really. Mac has a similar interface to a Linux server. So if you're using Mac now, you can um, you can do basically everything you can do on a Linux system. So You can get root access. You can change directories. You can write codes using nano. Well, you should. I don't know. But check, sure. But to me, they feel very very similar. So I don't see the need to actually. But if you want to go ahead and try your hand on Linux, you can go ahead. So, are there any other questions? Are there any other questions? Okay, so I think there are no longer any questions. So we've come to the end of today's class. We'll see next class is on Tuesday. The video will be made available on YouTube.